Hello, I'm Terry Baum, and I'm going to be reading you a short excerpt from one of the plays in my anthology, One Dyke's Theater. It was published in 2019 by Exit Press. Now, the play is Hick, a Love Story, the romance of Eleanor Roosevelt and Lorena Hickok, co-written by me and Pat Bond. It's the story of Eleanor's passionate lesbian relationship from the viewpoint of her lover, Lorena Hickok, who was called Hick by everyone. Now, Hick was the most famous woman journalist of her day. This is a true story, and it is confirmed by Eleanor's letters to Hick. There are over 2,000 letters from Eleanor Roosevelt to Lorena Hickok in the National Archive. The two women met when Hick was assigned to cover Eleanor the very first time FDR ran for president in 1932. When this scene begins, the women have been flirting with each other for a while, and Hick has decided that it is time to tell Eleanor how she feels about her. I took her to the Russian Tea Room, my favorite restaurant in New York City, balalaikas and all. She'd never been there before. I have to say this. I just have to. And don't hate me. Well, if you do, you do. Eleanor Roosevelt, I love you. Now, don't say anything. Just listen. I love you, and not like a sister or a friend, but like a lover. And then she said it, the miracle. Why, Hick, darling, don't you know I love you too? And I said, what? The goddamn balalaikas were drowning her out, so she had to say it again. I love you, Hick. There we were, in public, holding hands underneath the table. And it dawned on me like the day breaking, like the sun rising. She loves me. We're in love, not just me. We. All I wanted was to hold her in my arms. For God's sake, Mrs. Roosevelt, let's go home. I took her back to my apartment and I took her in my arms. I did. I kissed her and kissed her. She told me she'd been in love with me for a long time, ever since that silver morning we stepped off the train and I took her hand in mine for the first time. Oh, I thought I would pass out, but I didn't. I got out the only precious thing I had, a beautiful ring, a diamond and silver band. I slipped it on her finger. Will you be mine? Well, I can't ask you to marry me because you're already married, damn it. But will you be mine? Then we were both crying, and there she was in my arms, erasing every hurt I ever had, kissing my eyelids, my neck, and I heard myself finally saying everything I'd ever thought. Jesus, how I love you. You are my beauty, so good. And her saying, I thought I would never find you. All these years, love has only been about serving others, and now, oh, Hick, pick. Darling, I want to touch you everywhere. Now, I know that you've never been with a woman, so I'll go very slowly. She put her hand over my mouth to stop me, and she laughed. She told me she'd gone to an English boarding school. Oh, now you're laughing. I guess some of you went to the same boarding school, huh? Where the girls were all jumping into each other's beds? Well, although Eleanor never partook, everyone considered it completely normal, especially the headmistress. She said, "So, let's get on with it." And we got on with it. Afterwards, she lay in my arms. Our skin had dissolved, our blood, our very souls were flowing back and forth between us. She snuggled into me and we fell into a blissful sleep, never moving, not once, perfectly still. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Renee, Bess, and I have a new book coming out February 1st. It's called Between a Rock and a Soft Place, and it's published by Flashpoint Publications. Unlike my previous books, this one is a combination of short fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction. I'd like very much to share one of the poems with you because it sort of exemplifies my stance about poetry. That is, its narrative. So I call this a prose poem. It is both political and personal. The title is It Isn't, Then It Is. And basically, it's my reaction to the people who cannot seem to abide by the recommendations that will keep us safe during COVID. The recommendations to wear a mask, to stay separated from people, and to avoid any large gatherings. It's sort of this, my reaction against the "but I want it now" type of person who does not hesitate to endanger others. It's not my grandfather's lot of unloading food and bullets headed to the muddy, mustard gas-filled trenches, while images of his grandfather's back, bent under the weight of tobacco he never owned, flashed before his eyes, reminding him to leave the oyster cannery if given a second chance. It's not my grandmother's frustration, etched in chalk dust, that settled upon children's shoulders as they learned in their undersupplied, unheated Virginia classroom, and then followed her to Pennsylvania, where her color nullified her credentials and obliged her to wait tables in a tea room. It's not the yoke my father bore as he earned bed and board while studying trigonometry and German, before wearing the uniform and intercepting enemy messages from Japanese planes destined to collide with American fire over the red-stained Pacific. It's not the self-righteous anger boiling from the anti-war, poverty, racism placards hoisted above the heads of my generation to protest the napalm and knife-sharp bamboo that sliced through bloody feet in jungles thousands of miles away. It is none of those things. It is the slow torching of our sanity when we hear the senseless ramblings and the truths that disappear like wisps of smoke floating from visibility. It is the nonstop pain of absence when a loved one most needs our presence. It is the fear that keeps us company every time we leave our front door and tentatively breathe in the unknown. It is the silence in our workplaces, our schools, our sites of worship, our familiar streets. It is the contemptible weakness of those we counted on to be strong, to resist the commands to return the innocent to school, to attend to the droplets of illness that bring us to our knees. It is our head spinning free fall into sacrificing those who are poor, old, or infirm. It is us, and we know better. We know how to be better. Will we now? Thanks very much for listening, and please know that you're invited to get your copy of the book February 1st and onward. Thank you.
This is Giovanna Capone. I'm reading a short memoir published in the Patterson Literary Review, issue number 40, copyright 2012. I was raised in New York, but I live in the San Francisco Bay Area now. The piece I'm reading is called Playing with Fire. It's Saturday night, and Nikki's favorite bands are playing at the club downtown. Dead Kennedys, MDC, and Verbal Abuse. The place is jamming. Dancers crowd the mosh pit. Nikki grabs my hand and pulls me through the vibrating bodies to the front. She's dressed to the max in a black leather jacket, army boots, blue jeans torn at the knees, and a red bandana tied around one ankle. Her crummy gray t-shirt bears the face of an odd half-human. Underneath are two words: destitute freak. She wears this shirt to every concert and club. Spiked bracelets run down her arms. Her nose ring has a thin metal chain going from nostril to earlobe. It makes me nervous. Her flaming red-orange hair is spiked straight up like her head's on fire. She gave me a few spiked bracelets to wear, so I'd feel like I'm part of things. I drop her hand and stand on the sidelines to watch. We're the only girl couple in the whole crowd. She doesn't seem to notice, but I noticed immediately. It's the first thing I see. Where are the other lesbians? I stand under a massive amp while Verbal Abuse goes full blast. Why did I pay good money to be screamed at? I could just move home with my parents. The Dead Kennedys and MDC are next. It stands for Millions of Dead Cops. Jello Biafra grabs the mic and screams, "All religions make me want to throw up! All religions suck!" Behind him, the drummer is bashing his skins. The mosh pit goes crazy. The dancers are decked out in spiky hair and black leather. I see tattoos on arms of smiling skulls that say, "No future." Colored mohawks are gelled up like fins. They look like tropical fish in a giant aquarium, swimming all zigzag. Nikki is fearless. She leaps in and out of that mosh pit, slamming those 6-foot bald-headed galoots like there's no tomorrow. How the hell did I meet this woman? Our paths crossed 2 months ago, the night Reagan was re-elected. The memory is burned into my brain like a tattoo. I had just gotten off work and was cruising through the UT campus on my bike. It was so quiet I could hear my engine hum. But this was no ordinary evening. A spark was in the air. Election night. The fates of kings were about to be decided. As I cruised past the tavern in the student union, I saw cop cars and fire trucks scattered like kids' toys. But this was no make-believe. I heard muffled shouting in the distance. The frat boys and the political punks were in the tavern knocking heads and turning over tables, a continuation of the class war they'd been waging for months. It all started with a letter to the editor of the Daily Texan, the campus paper. I knew it because the frat boys eat at Burger King all the time and leave newspapers and junk all over the tables. I work there 5 days a week. Paying the rent seems to be the sole reason for my existence. Most of these frat boys, they've never worked a day in their life. But they leave their old burger boxes and half-eaten crap everywhere, and I have to clean it up. 3 weeks ago, there was a hazing death on campus. A 19-year-old who was rushing a local frat house. A punk named Control Rat X was the first to sound the shots of this all-out class war with a scathing letter criticizing the frats, their alcoholic binges, and sadistic rituals. This freshman died of heart failure during rush week when a couple of rival frat houses were fighting over new members. They forced the new guys to guzzle gallons of cheap beer and run a 3-hour marathon in the heat. It ended in a fatality. The Daily Texan wrote a big article about the death, forcing the university chancellor to investigate campus hazing. All hell broke loose on the newspaper editorial page. First, the letter from Control Rat X, which set off the feud. He said how much he hated the Greeks and their sick community. "Frat boys, you suck. What a bunch of white privileged little losers. Every one of you." A volley of sniping, hateful letters between the frats and the punks followed, each one worse than the one before. Election night was their big showdown, a culmination of weeks of venom, complete with a national arena. Nikki was right there, spiked hair and all. It was a mob scene at the campus tavern. Outside, I could see the television screen in the bar flashing landslide victories for the Republicans, one state after another taken by Reagan and Bush. Ronnie's smiling mug was everywhere, and the frats were ecstatic. In a concrete way, his victory tallied a semester of rivalry in their favor, and they knew it. They're the sons of Texas oil tycoons and corporate millionaires, waiting to inherit daddy's money. The frat guys stood on the tables in their polo shirts and plaid shorts, chanting, "Ray gun, Ray gun, Ray gun." They laughed at the punks. 10 years from now, you skinheads will be working for us. "Fuck off, fascist!" the punks screamed back. Nikki was standing on a bar stool hollering when some drunk frat guy came up and grabbed her ass. She picked up an empty bottle and slammed it over his head. That was the point of no return. Pretty soon fists were flying and more tables were turning over. The boys were bashing each other's heads in. In the commotion, Nikki slipped out the back door and calmly walked through the entire student union in her black leather miniskirt and spiked blue mohawk, yanking every fire alarm she could find. She pulled about 15 alarms. When I ran into her that night, the place was a beehive. Policemen were shouting into bullhorns. Nikki waltzes right past them and zeroes in on me. She plops down on my motorcycle seat like I'm her two-wheeled limousine service. "Get me out of here, will you?" "What? Who the hell are you?"
My name is Thea Iberall. I live in Massachusetts, and I'm going to read from my novel, The Swallow and the Nightingale. It's about a 4,000-year-old secret brought through time by the birds. And my main character, Dr. Deborah Wright, is an ornithologist at Berkeley, and she is having breakfast with her daughter, Rachel. Deborah adjusted her fork and knife, finding it easier to eat European style instead of transferring her fork to her left hand. She stared at the bandage on her index finger. Stephen, who's her husband, her estranged husband. Stephen had always been closer to Rachel, and now he was the one on sabbatical at UC Irvine. He was physically closer as well. A wave of loneliness gripped her heart. She tried to sound casual. "He said you have some news." Rachel put down her fork and studied her shakshuka creation as if she were reading clouds. "There's something I want to tell you." Deborah jerked back against the bench. Now she wasn't sure she was ready to hear whatever Rachel was going to say. Rachel's coming out to them had started with those words. Rachel said, "Okay, I'll tell you what's happening. Shelley and I have asked Rabbi Stern to marry us." "What?" Deborah almost dropped her fork. "We want to be married." Rachel pushed her hair behind her ear. "Is that a crime?" Rabbi Stern should have said yes. What did he say? Deborah's brain took off in new directions. This was absurd. Yes, it's a crime, she thought, but she didn't say. He said he believes we can find husbands and raise children, she paused. Deborah stared at her daughter. This is crazy. Rachel looked unhappy. The way your mothers did, he said. The way millions of other women do every year. He said he warned us about that from the time we became a couple. Something about Jews having a moral obligation to strive for the right path. What did you expect? Deborah frowned, her eyes gravitating toward the Jewish candelabra. It seems hypocritical to me. I argued with him that many in the congregation have accepted us into its midst. We've been going to services regularly for 2 years. Shelley for most of her life. But he's so much like a raging bull, so sure of his place in the order of nature. Rachel picked out her eggs, pushing them around her plate. Where's my coffee? Deborah got up, seeing her mug on the counter. If only Rachel hadn't started going to that synagogue. Rachel never quite fit in from birth on. Deborah thought back to the hospital the very first time she held Rachel. This little bundle of yawning squirminess. Stephen leaned over them. A new nurse took one look at the interracial family. The shock on her face said it all. Deborah had been used to the discrimination directed toward her and Stephen, but in that instant, she now had to deal with it being directed at her beautiful daughter. She had tried to protect Rachel, a task easier to do when she was a child. Deborah's heart started to pound. Stephen should be here. Did you let the rabbi see you get mad? Deborah asked, standing at the counter. Rachel turned to look at her. What? Probably. I felt really pissed off. I'm not immoral. I'm just trying to live my life, be happy. I love Shelley. You said you accept us, but I don't really believe you. Marriage between two people of the same sex was impossible in Orthodox Judaism. Deborah flashed back to her own wedding to Stephen, her parents' strong feelings against her marriage. She had been 28 years old and had turned away from the orthodoxy by then. Even though her parents had lived another 20 years, the schism was set in concrete. She barely spoke to them again. Still, she could remember the joy she experienced under the chuppah when the Reform rabbi and the UCC minister both pronounced her and Stephen united in God's eyes. It wasn't the God part she cared about. It was the experience of standing next to someone she loved so deeply, knowing they were building a life together. She felt the exhilaration of becoming an adult by making this public commitment. At the beginning of the ceremony, Stephen had squeezed her hand and whispered, I love you. A peaceful smile on his face, his eyes were wide open, as if his love were too great to be contained. That moment had taken her breath away. He was like an angel coming into her life, a rock she could count on. It almost counteracted the pain of her parents boycotting their wedding. Tears welled up in Deborah's eyes. She took her mug back to the table. Rachel, these 2 years haven't been easy for me. When you started going to the synagogue, I felt shocked that you had embraced Orthodox Judaism, the religion I had walked away from. And you met Shelley, and suddenly you were gay, like she recruited you. But Mom, I know, let me finish. I tried to keep track of your boyfriends. What's his name in college? Frank? Yeah, that one with the unicycle. I didn't think him right for you. Deborah smiled under her tears. He was one of them. You were traveling too much to know any of the others. I didn't travel a lot. I carried a heavy teaching load. Deborah blinked hard to take control. I felt glad you broke up with him. But when you stopped dating in your junior year, I worried because I thought nobody could match you, which is why I thought you just gave up on men. Deborah stared at her coffee cup. I understand now that Shelley didn't recruit you. Why not just get married by a justice of the peace? Isn't same-sex marriage legal in California? You're right, we could do that. But that's not the point. We aren't a lifestyle. We aren't immoral. We live an orthodox way of life. Deborah played with her mug. She could hear how much Rachel wanted this, how to reach over the chasm between them. how to find a way to erase the years of distance. If only it was as easy as drawing with crayons or reaching over the table. Even that wasn't easy. Releasing the mug, she stood up. Then let's go talk to him. Who? Rachel looked at her. That rabbi of yours. Deborah rummaged in her bag and heard the sound of her keys. Are you coming?
Counterclockwise, love, she sang in the shower, washing her mess of curls. This is how we empty where the darkness lives, infiltrate the madness made sanctuary in the tombs of the living. She anoints me, 91st Psalm in olive oil, a return to spirit. Under the wings of my God I find darkness, the kind of ache you wish away until you drown in slumber, the kind of rage you'd empty climped into the still small air at just to hear some fucking noise. There is a noose at my rib cage, begging me to contort myself into a lesser me. The noose at my jugular is there for old time's sake, tearing me away from the blacked out images painting my peripheral. I am a mass and a massacre. All this holy bleeding, never to bring forth life, but the sacrifice is mine. I tried 1,000 times to secure the sublime, but my God be a refuge against my will and better judgment. And ain't the world collapsing? Ain't we homeless and hungry? And all this night does is fly? Is this why Kanye moniker Yeezy, a status symbol of a still small voice? Bring me your gold, your rams, your first fruit, and make a feast for the living. The dead have had their fill. The dead have had their fun, and I have yet to live. Order my steps in the swag, sir. Something black enough to wake my ancestors. Sing Temptations, my girl, to your granny. Watch her smile burst open like the gates. We be black and holy, whole and weary, and all they ever say to me is, I will give you rest. And this is called Bloom. The southern drawl punctuating my daydreams. Sing slowly to me. Let me savor this. Whether it be seasonal or sustained, I want to be here. To know you past formalities. To call you friend, lover, partner. Rest your weary head with me, dear one, and in me find the rest of aiding your soul. We could grow here, you know. Wherever this path may lead, stay here with me, and I with you, listening to the rustling of the trees at autumn, finding new blooms in spring. I once asked you your favorite flower, and your lips sprang rose so softly you'd forget the bloody thorns you carry. This is called Happy Bop. Every day I curl my hair in ritual, water and conditioner. Couldn't make it stay just right, so I add some castor oil to thicken the strands and make new man of me. I like it better this way. Coconut sheen and shine. This golden aura permeates my scalp and soul. I toy in the mirror, fluff my mess of tendrils till they lie just right. In the mirror, I smile just bright enough to blind my narrow eyes, gleaming at the mess I've made of vanity. Vanity is all that eludes me. I tell myself I still don't care about reflections. Just my hair will do. The rest can suffer in silence. A bigger picture awaits the open doors I burst through with valor. The real world awaits. This golden aura permeates my scalp and soul. I dress to impress my own reflection. See vibrance in my own aura. Love the me in my reflection. In my noontime query, sometimes I think I'm not that bad after all. This golden aura permeates my scalp and soul. Constellation. I'm in love with the girl. She smile like the moon, all subtle like sea tide, and she smile at me when she don't think I can see, but I catch it, like the stars here in my hands. I try and make her smile, all quirk and amen, to make her think a thought she ain't thought before still. She give nothing she ain't planned on. She be bubbly as champagne on days she decide to be, cold as winter on the rest, like the stars here in my hands. She been smiling at me lately, seen the glimmer in her eye, and my heart skip beats, and her hands touch mine, and my smile tore open and hers did too, like the stars here in my hands. Katie. Black girl got named like molasses, sweet, stuck in the roof of your mouth like honey, like gum you fell asleep with, like gum you cut out of your hair. Black girl got named like honey, like sweet tea, all Southern belle. Blessed be the pure in heart. Black girl been called white girl all her life. She had to fight to bear the melanin they call her burnt for, to rake the afro from her curls. Black girl got named like molasses, sweet stuck in the roof of your mouth like the words she couldn't say, like her teeth split open her lip. Blessed be the pure in heart. Blessed be the pure in soul, in body, in mind, all Cathos, in Katie, in Catherine. Create in me pure hearts like these. Renew in me spirits of wildflowers, sweet as molasses. Blessed be the pure in heart. Two, after no name. Who masqueraded the system? A nigga, they pulled the trigger. It's bigger than you and I. I'm hoping that when I die, they smoking the highest high. Oblivious to the system, they keeping us at a distance. Don't nobody want to be holy, just want to be whole. Sunday morning can't save me now. Amen, amen. Darkness help me in the wake. Amen, amen. I sailed 1,000 ships to sink. Won't let them make a slave of me. Violence in the streets, my woman brought it home. I fear for the kids. I am but a man. Told me canvas was at the bottom of all of this. I'm spitting, no swallowing. You know who the hollowed is. No need for illusion. Got wrapped in confusion. Had to tell him what the truth is on who I be. Father God's favorite symphony. Everything is empty here. Ain't nobody around to distract me from the madness. Bound by sadness, the news would be tragic. I'm looking outside my window, got me praying for black magic. Me so happy now. Me so Mississippi, Alabama, Birmingham, Atlanta. Wearing red like Santa. Bad like Santana, boy put your hands up, might just fuck your father. Pussy be an altar, I don't get specific, this bitch be prolific. The difference is my smile. Como quiero contigo para siempre. How you have me shining on my worst days.
Hi there, I'm Lynn Ames, and I want to read to you from my brand new novel, 46. It's the story of Emma McMasters. Emma McMasters is the 46th President of the United States. And I want to pick up the story in chapter 2. This is inauguration morning, and Emma, who has stayed at Blair House overnight, the house where the incoming president usually stays before the inauguration, and so she is reflective on this inauguration morning. So she's talking in this scene to her chief of staff at first, Nichelle Johnson, a woman who has been with her since Emma was a wet behind the ears state senator in New York. Not for the first time, Emma wished the occasion called for more practical footwear. She smiled ironically as she recalled Ann Richards' famous quote about Ginger Rogers doing everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in high heels. No doubt the deceased governor of Texas would have said the same of a female president. Emma stamped her feet to restore feeling and shivered inside her winter coat. Why couldn't this inauguration day have emulated Ronald Reagan's first inauguration, when the temperature in Washington, D.C. had reached a balmy 55 degrees? She exhaled and watched as her frozen breaths rose skyward. At least the sun was shining, and the wind had died down a bit after last night's light dusting of snow. She stood by herself in the private enclosed Ross Garden, the rear of the president's guest house, Blair House, across the street from the White House. In another few hours, she would walk through those iconic doors as President of the United States of America. We made it, Heather. God, she wished her wife were here to give the speech one last bit of polish. Heather was so good at that. Emma bowed her head as the all-too-familiar stab of pain pierced her heart. They were supposed to be doing this together. Heather should have been holding the McMasters family Bible as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court administered the oath of office. In Heather's stead, Emma had invited her mentor, her mother's best friend, and the woman with whom she'd grown up emulating to do the honors. Nichelle materialized next to her. Madam President-elect, it's time to go to St. John's for the morning service. You have got to stop sneaking up on me. I thought it was part of my job description to be discreet. Is that in the Presidential Chief of Staff Handbook? It worked for Martin Sheen in The American President, not to mention John Spencer on The West Wing. You're shaping your role based on fictional characters you admire? Nichelle shrugged. Works for me. Well, I'll tell you this much. I'm not Michael Douglas. You're not Martin Sheen, we're not playing billiards, and you're not going to tell me off in colorful language if you think my head is up my wazoo. Aw, I was looking forward to that. Emma linked arms with Nichelle as they strolled. Promise me you'll never let me take myself too seriously. I promise. Emma pulled them up short. And that you'll always tell me the truth, even if I don't want to hear it. You got it. And that you'll keep the crazies away from me. Don't push it. Some of those crazies are your constituents. All of those crazies, at least the American ones, are my constituents, and some of them are elected officials. Too true. Nichelle urged them forward again. Are you really going to stand in the freezing cold without a coat to deliver the inaugural address? I am. It sends a strong signal. Yeah, it tells people that president doesn't have an ounce of common sense. It worked for Kennedy, Reagan, and Clinton. You know 2 of those 3 got shot and the other one got impeached, right? Okay, maybe those weren't the best examples. Emma said goodbye to Nichelle and joined her Secret Service entourage at the side of her limousine. We're here, Madam President-elect. One of the Secret Service agents opened the door and Emma stepped out. She was greeted by the rector as she entered the Episcopal Church where almost every modern-day president-elect and vice president-elect attended service on inauguration morning. Emma took her place in the traditional presidential pew, Pew 54, and settled in for the brief service. As much as she tried to take in the details, she couldn't keep her thoughts from straying to the precedent-breaking moment that would come next. For only the 4th time in the United States history, the incumbent president had chosen not to accompany the president-elect from the White House to the U.S. Capitol for the inauguration. As a student of history, this bothered Emma. Even Woodrow Wilson, who refused to attend his successor Warren G. Harding's inauguration in 1921, rode with the next president to the Capitol before departing. Beyond that, word of the snub was dominating headlines and news shows everywhere, and the hashtag Pouting POTUS was trending on Twitter. While that was a modest improvement over the far right's preferred hashtag, Leslie Go Home, it still detracted from the dignity of the occasion and the traditional transition of power. Emma had received the letter yesterday on White House stationery, signed by the president, informing her of his decision. She consoled herself by admitting inwardly that, on a practical level, it would be nice not to have to deal with the awkwardness of the moment. She imagined the photographers snapping away as she and the outgoing president, who at every turn during the course of the campaign had defamed and debased her, exchanged a handshake and an insincere smile as he and his wife boarded Marine One for the last time. No, she wouldn't be sorry to miss that photo op. Then later in the day, the chairman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies informed her via telephone that the incumbent president had made it known that he and his wife would depart at exactly noon from the south lawn of the White House, the very moment Emma would be standing on the west terrace of the U.S. Capitol taking the oath of office. Even for this president, the blatant show of disrespect for tradition, for her, and the office of the presidency was astounding. We're sorry, Madam President-elect, we never imagined. Of course not. Please, don't worry about it. It wasn't your decision to make. Yes, but the plan calls for you to go from the service at St. John's directly to the White House, where you were to be met by the president at the North Portico and ride together to the Capitol for the oath and the inauguration ceremony. I'm familiar with the tradition. Under the circumstances, you'll be going directly from St. John's to the Capitol. I'm concerned you'll be waiting in the holding room for an additional half hour to 45 minutes. Emma hated the idea of cooling her heels in some Capitol anteroom simply because the current resident of the White House rebuffed her. She smiled as the perfect solution presented itself. I know precisely what I want to do with that extra time. If the logistics don't present too much of a nightmare, I'd like to make a stop along the route. A stop? Yes, I think it would send the perfect message if I paused on the way to taking the oath of office to visit the original copies of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. After a moment of silence, the chairman replied, That's brilliant. The National Archives is directly on the route. I'm sure the Secret Service can secure the rotunda without too much trouble. We can allow the press to photograph you. Hold it right there. I'll allow the photo op, but only from a distance looking into the rotunda. I don't want them in the rotunda itself, and I think I'd prefer if this was an unannounced stop. But Emma felt her heart settle. No, this is more than just a photo op for me. The Constitution stands for something. Those documents stand for something, and so do I. I don't want the moment sullied by treating it cynically. Understood, Madam President-elect. We will make that happen. Please convey my apologies for the last-minute scramble to the committee and the security forces. This isn't your fault. Maybe not, but it's going to inconvenience people. Emma considered. If possible, I'd prefer it if the archives themselves remained open during my visit and only the rotunda was unavailable to the public. I don't want to deprive visitors of the opportunity to spend time at one of the most important treasures in our capital. I'm not sure the Secret Service is going to like that, but we'll do our best. I know you will. Emma snapped her focus back to the present as the Reverend said, I know you all join me in wishing our President-elect Godspeed as she undertakes her new role. May God watch over her and watch over all of us. Amen. Amen, Emma murmured.
Hello, I'm happy to be here with you all at this virtual gathering. My name is Janet Aalfs, and I'm going to be reading from my book of poems, Bird of a Thousand Eyes. The first poem begins with an epigraph from Muriel Rukeyser, Fire striking its word among us. Heron in the autumn shallows. Your curving belly, this fluid mirror, seamless as love. You slip through silent water. Shimmers soak each hollow quill, frond of feather, silver blue cell until you are nothing but a glow within and beyond visible. Gold leaves float on shadows that break, then join in ripples your slow legs weave. You give me cloud, river, sun, disguised as bird. You offer dreams in languages I feel, yet cannot speak. Lost as I am within this burning. My next poem is dedicated to Gloria Anzaldúa, wonderful poet, arts activist, educator, and friend. Gloria, I remember you looked up into branches, shadows on your face. Cuando vives en la frontera, you said, people walk through you. In the dream tunnel pressed through dark, everything richly woven. Ocean music pulsed, web at the center, reeling us out on story threads of light. Spider in the hollow of your throat, you loved the swirl of words. Oak and maple, hot fry orange. Mestiza, you sang, touching the dirt, tasting a yellow kernel and finding it sweet, returning your footsteps, your voice, to this and every crossroad. This poem I wrote after a trip with my Tai Chi teacher, Grandmaster Wenmei Yu, to her hometown, Suzhou, China. Silver boxes for Guanyin. A path once hidden opens on the hill, no signs to her temple. Sutras weave, and the pine turtle, talk, talk, echoes. I cannot say what the words mean, empty boxes in the dark. An elder pushes by to offer the moon-white buns she has steamed in a reed basket. Red wax drips, incense sweet as rice, lotus, and cherry. Long bones strange in the archway, my hair light as flame, the women stare. Together, our hands invite the wind, called by the woman whose eyes reveal what sings within. And my last poem is called Everything I Could Want. I steal time for what I want, as if I could have it. As if the sunflowers that seeded themselves belong to our garden. Or the volunteer portulaca, more lush than those we planted. Ruffled blossoms, blazing ruby cream, and tangerine became this thick by my hand. No, I can't speak for them. Can't explain their opening in different hues on the same stem, nor claim even one moment of their fire to exhale. Rather, walk a wide path and sing, as if I have everything I could want without force. To touch each whisper of leaf, breathing sweet earth green over and over, beginning. To feel myself made of all the petals I've seen and those still sleeping. Luminescent asters in the blue hour of dusk. Mist rising from their starlight crowns, and the moon almost full above the hills. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jaimie Kelton.
Hi, I'm Robin Hopkins, and Jaimie and I are the co-hosts of the podcast If These Ovaries Could Talk, and we are also the authors of this here book, If These Ovaries Could Talk, the things we've learned about making an LGBTQ family.
That is right, Robin. And our book is all about LGBTQ families and how we make them. Do we go the science route? Do we care if our kids share our genetic material? Is money an issue when it comes to choosing our path? But the book is also about what life is like for LGBTQ families. We talk about being out for your kids because, let's face it, they are always listening. And we talk about what it's like for queer spawn.
Absolutely. And this book, it's really unique because it sets up each topic. So for instance, there's a chapter about the cost of creating your family. And then you get each story of how Jaimie and I created our families regarding that topic. But there's also a collection of stories from LGBTQ voices that are all across the rainbow, sharing their family journey experiences. And the stories they're funny, they're touching, they're heartwarming. Sometimes they're sad or exhausting, but they are always beautiful.
So here is a reading from our book. It's from chapter 9, which is titled Talking to Your Kids About Their Family.
Here we go.
Chapter 9, Talking to Your Kids About Their Family. My theory and the way I parented them, all this stuff, is when they asked a question, I would answer it. And then I would say, do you want to know more? Judy Gold. Disclosure is a really important word for LGBTQ families, and a fancy new term we learned on a recent episode from an LGBTQ family building expert who we lovingly refer to as Lisa the therapist. Disclosure, noun. The act of talking to your child about how they were made and preparing them to handle their differences in a world that is predominantly heterosexual and cisgender. When, where, and how do you decide to talk to your kids about where they come from? For our families, this question is a doozy that requires some intensive thought. To a certain extent, the decision to talk to our kids has already been made for us because we can't pass as traditional families. At some point, whether it be in elementary school or daycare, kids recognize that LGBTQ families are different from other families, and they start asking questions. There's a lot of research out there suggesting that the earlier you talk to your kids about their story, the better it is for them. But it's important to make your conversations age appropriate and let the kid lead. Don't answer more than is asked, start small, and add to the conversation over time.
The good news is there are more and more families like us out there, and that means there is more support. There are books to read to your kids, educational resources available online, support groups, therapists that specialize in family building, and LGBTQ family classes and programming at community centers. What we heard from family after family is that while the conversation can be uncomfortable for some parents, the kids seem to take it in stride and adjust to their family structure. This doesn't mean that there won't be bumps in the road, but as intentional as we have to be in making our families, chances are good that behavior will carry over into the way we parent. Below are just a few examples of the families we talked to who are striving to help their kids become comfortable and proud of who they are and how they got there.
Stacy Ann Chin. There was no special moment when Stacy Ann told her daughter Zuri about how she was made. It's just always been a part of their conversation. Stacy Ann. My daughter has always known, and she'll tell you, my sperm came from Baba and my egg came from my mom. Then the doctor put them together and whisked them around. Then they put the egg back in my mom in her uterus. I was in there for 9 months, and the doctor could have cut me out, or I could have come out through the vagina. But I wouldn't come out through the vagina because maybe it was icky. And so he had to cut the thing, and he pulled me out. When I came out, I didn't cry. And he was like, why isn't she crying? It was because I didn't have anything to cry about.
Brian Esser. Always the lawyer, Brian believes in being straightforward with his kids when talking about their family story. Brian. Some people really give their kids a script that the kid almost regurgitates back. And I'm not judging people who do that. I mean, do it your way. But we've tried to give our kids age-appropriate information and let them think about how they feel about it and let them internalize their own story.
Emma T. Emma, daughter to Ray and Margie, felt a lot of pride in her family because of how open her moms were about their family story. Emma. My parents were so open about everything. Anything I asked was answered. That was the policy. So I knew where babies came from a lot earlier than other people. I asked things earlier, but I also got truthful answers. I was spoken to as an adult, even as a child. They really were honest, and I think I grew up, therefore, with a lot of pride and not with shame about our family.
Senator Zach Walls. You might remember Zach Walls as the young man who went viral giving a speech to the Iowa House of Representatives to support his two-mom family. Now he's a state senator and shared how open his moms were about their family when he was growing up. Zach. My moms were very straightforward with me about the donor. There are no secrets. They shared a recording that the cryobank did on a CD. I think that's pretty normal. He had filled out a questionnaire. I could read that. We have a donor number, and my mom made up a name for him. It was Wolfgang, because that was the name that she had threatened to name me when she was talking about her pregnancy with my grandparents. My mom, Terry, God bless her, from before I could understand, told me stories about how I came to be. She talked about artificial insemination right out of the gate. I literally don't remember a time when I didn't know. There was never a moment where she sat me down and we talked about it. I just always knew.
Hello, I'm Betty Jean Steinshouer. I'm going to explore a little today in Long Road to Red Cloud, a book that took me almost 40 years to write. It started out as an offshoot of a one-woman show I had performed called Willa Cather Speaks. During those first 30 years of research, I often felt stymied by the fact that Willa Cather put it in her will that her letters could never be published or quoted from in any printed form. So the only thing I could do under the fair use section of copyright law was to present her for educational purposes, a process called Chautauqua. The original title of the book was Life Lessons from Willa Cather. It included useful adages, such things as love the land and know your neighbors, be yourself, stand up to bullying, and find a mentor. Then, in 2013, something happened that rocked my world. Willa Cather's nieces and nephews decided that they didn't need to keep her secrets anymore, and they gave permission for her letters to begin to be published after 70 years. Biographers and scholars had always assumed that Willa Cather wanted to hide the fact that she loved women, but she was never really in the closet. She was very open in writing love letters to and about her first love, but Louise Pound chose to stay hidden and spend the rest of her life in Lincoln, and Willa Cather, known as Bill on campus, moved on after college to Pittsburgh, where she fell in love with Isabel McClung, the woman for whom she would later say all her books had been written. Isabel also gave in to the pressure of her family to find a man and marry. So a heartbroken Willa Cather moved to New York and eventually met and set up housekeeping with Edith Lewis, with whom she would spend the rest of her life. The mystery that I still had to solve was the real reason Willa Cather guarded her privacy so fiercely. It deals with a subject few people want to think about: those born with one or more intersex conditions, also known as DSDs, differences or disorders in sex development. You see, when the firstborn child of Mary Virginia Bulk and Charles Fettigue Cather was born on December 7, 1873, the first naming was for the child's grandfathers, who were both named William. The baby was called Willie for the first 14 months. Then the name had to be changed to a girl's name. Mr. Cather, who apparently had been informed by Dr. Love that the child was not a viable male, insisted early on that the name would be Willella, and it was written that way in the family Bible. But Mrs. Cather, with her mother's instinct, knew it had to be closer to what the child had answered to for more than a year. She changed it to Willa. We cannot know what transpired at the birth, only that the Cathers were left with a child who was androgynous. She had a female dog she gave a boy's name to match her own. Vic, the border collie, and Willie, the Cather's little tomboy, roamed Charles Cather's sheep farm together. But the clumsy girl's name, Willa, did not take. By 1883, just before the child's 10th birthday, the Cathers tried that age-old remedy, the geographic cure, and moved across the country to Nebraska. Determined to make a fresh start, Miss Willie Cather would be dressed in as frilly clothing as her mother could manage, but she would sneak a pair of her brother's dungarees out of the house and change into them at the earliest opportunity in order to play the role of her favorite persona, William Cather, M.D. She convinced the town barber to give her a haircut that would fit her self-image as she entered puberty. Young Willie Cather also loved to play male roles in the town dramas at the Red Cloud Opera House, continuing her cross-dressing even after she went away to the university. She would have to endure a lot of bullying during her college days, some of it at the hands of Roscoe and Olivia Pound, siblings of her college lover. She was seeking the Willa she must become from the Willie she had been. There were also legions of doctor's appointments and hospital visits, trying to sort out her medical issues, including at least 2 extended visits to the Mayo Clinic before and after she became famous from receiving the Pulitzer Prize in 1923. I want to close with the last 2 or 3 paragraphs of the final life lesson from Willa Cather. The last shall be first. Willa Cather's letters have been so long paraphrased and distorted that it will take a while for her family secrets to dissipate and her truths to be known. A perfect example is that haunting letter in which she acknowledged her name confusion to a man named Colonel Butler. Here is how it sounded in Janice Stout's terse paraphrase in her 2002 calendar of letters. Back when direct quoting was still verboten. Yes, is a woman, can't explain name. In the South, however, it was common to feminize the name of a male relative. Wish they had just left it William. We can breathe a collective sigh of relief that Willa Cather's actual words can finally be known, that we can see for ourselves the profound statement she made about herself. Not wish they had just left it William, but I would have preferred to be William without modification. Whatever it means to each person who reads it now, whatever it meant to Willa Sibert Cather, it was what she chose to name herself. She couldn't keep the William, but she kept the Sibert. She kept it on her letterhead, her checks, and in her last will and testament. Not Willa Love or Lava. She freed herself from the name of the doctor who delivered her. Willa Cather did become everything she was meant to be. A letter in UNL's Rosowski collection was written on letterhead from the State Bank of Red Cloud, dated September 23, 1927. It is from Willa Cather's parents, addressed to our dear, kind daughter. They are writing to express their appreciation of Death Comes for the Archbishop. They want to tell her that they have been thinking about her childhood, your youthful days, when you were always ready and willing to meet the emergencies of life as they came. Meeting life's emergencies presented a greater challenge for Willa Cather than for most of us. Yet she not only survived, but thrived through all of the emergencies and made of herself an artist.